Well, good morning and welcome. It is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
It's a beautiful Tuesday morning from here in Lagos. I was going to say Thursday.
At some point, while at the office, I was like, wait a minute, what's today's date?
It just rolls so fast. Well, I'm Kaide Peculiar. You're welcome.
Well, as you can see already, we have Ikechukwu Amici with us this morning. He is the editor of the Niche newspaper. Thank you so much for your time today.
Always my pleasure.
Well, you deal with national issues every day as an editor, so help us deal with some of these. The lead on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune is, as Buhari addresses NAS on Thursday, maybe that's why Thursday was interesting. Reps PDP bicker over calls for his impeachment. That story is on page 23. Of course, you know the backstory to all of this conversation. But then, what, in your opinion, would be responsible for this bickering?
I think they are just playing politics. It's politicking. Of course, PDP is saying that the president should resign, and naturally, APC, his party, will say, on what basis are you asking the president to resign? But for me, that's a distraction. The issue is that the president is going to address a joint session of the National Assembly on Thursday. And of course, it was because of the motion that was passed on the floor of the House of Representatives last week, calling him to come and tell Nigerians what is going on in the country in respect of the deteriorating security situation in the land. Don't also forget that the Senate also passed a strongly worded motion asking the president to sack the service chiefs. And that was about the third time in the last 1 year that they are going to pass such a resolution. So it is normal that when things go wrong, the president of a country should be able to talk. The lawmakers are the representatives of the people. So he should be able to tell us, we the people that elected them through our representatives in the National Assembly, what the issues are, what the government is doing. Why is it that despite their best efforts, we don't seem to have a handle on the security situation in the country?
Well, a number of interesting angles, so many people will be willing to look at that. For instance, there's going to be that question of, is it going to be an interactive session or is it just going to be an address? So what are you looking forward to?
It should be both. It should be both. Of course,
so
the president...
expecting the president to engage questions from...
Exactly.
Has that ever happened to any president?
That I'm not aware of. But then there's always... The first time. And because it is a very grave issue we are dealing with. You don't get up in the morning and 43 of your citizens are slaughtered, literally slaughtered. And everybody thinks it is normal. In every other country, even in African countries, if you wake up in the morning and 43 people are gruesomely murdered, as those rice farmers were murdered in Zabamari in Borno State, people ought to ask questions. So I expect that the president will address them and tell them this is what we have done.
Okay.
Then people should be able to ask him questions so that the gaps, if there are any, could be filled.
Well, there are so many other issues on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune this morning that will pique your interest, but let me pick on this one. NSARS, please fortify Lekki toll gate, youths protest in Osun, all calm in Abuja, other states. Buhari warns against violent protests. That story is on page 5.
Again, we seem to be getting things wrong in this country. We have so much politicized the NSAS protest, so much so that we are leaving the issue, the substance, which is police brutality.
When you say politicized, in what way?
Because the government is not addressing the core issue.
What is the core issue?
The
The main issues well, the federal government will tell you that the main issues are being addressed. You are aware of all that.
No, they are not. For instance, the president has said police welfare. Ayo, in practical terms, what has the government done? They said they have disbanded SARS. Let us even agree that SARS has been disbanded. What about the issue of police welfare? Look.
Which is also being addressed. You know that they set up that committee that is looking into all of that already. You know that.
There are low-hanging fruits. I think I've argued this on this platform before. See, when you are talking about the welfare of police officers, there are things the president can do immediately. 3 years ago, I think that was in 2017, there was a tripartite committee of police authorities, PENCOM, and Nigerian Police Force Pensions Limited. They met and came up with two fundamental issues, which they said the biggest elephant in the room when it comes to police welfare is what happens to the average policeman when he retires. Pension is poor, awful. And most of the crimes they commit while in service is an attempt to make sure that they save for the rainy day. So if the average policeman is sure that his retirement will be good enough for him, maybe there will be a reduction in the egregious acts that they perpetrate every day. And this tripartite committee said two things. That policemen, because of the historically low wages that they earn, the contributory pension scheme is contribution from these low wages, so that when they retire, it is still the same thing. So that committee agreed that policemen should be paid 300% of their gross annual salary, 300% on retirement as special gratuity. So the implication is that, if you are a policeman and you are earning, let's say, 50,000 as your...
That's too small for me.
No, yes, as your gross pay, that when you retire, you should be paid 300% of that as special gratuity. That will address the issue so that your savings in your retirement savings account will now be left to address the issue of your monthly pension. The second issue that was addressed is that AIGs and above should retire with full benefits, just like permanent secretaries. Why? Because they said AIG is a political appointment. In most cases, people don't know that after you have been promoted as a commissioner of police, that's about the highest professional rank you can attain. Every other thing is political appointment.
So you don't think that we're doing enough in that you don't think that is being addressed at all?
They have written a letter, as I speak with you, because I am aware, is on the president's table to address these two issues.
Okay.
They have not been addressed. So if you're talking about police welfare, there are more fundamental issues. Now, when you confront an average policeman who retired 6-7 months ago, he will tell you his pension has not been paid.
Okay.
And that is true. Why? Because there is what we call accrued rights. Pension package is a combination of accrued rights and then the contributions. And unless and until the accrued rights are released by the government, your PFA does not pay you.
Okay.
The last time the government released accrued rights was in October 2019. So every policeman who retired since November 2019 has not been paid his pension.
There's so many questions to ask about that one, because if these are issues that people are aware of, most certainly it's something to give attention to. Yes, so.
Well, let's take a look at Nigerian News Direct. I was almost suggesting a round table to really discuss these issues. But take a look at the front page of Nigerian News Direct. The big story, reps disown call for Buhari's impeachment. You know, the writers call for president's impeachment constitutional. That's PDP. Presidents to address NAS. That's on page 2. I mean, we touched on that earlier on. And I recall the spokesperson for the House of Reps saying it was just a member of the opposition party calling for impeachment, not the whole National Assembly. But take a look at this one. Governor Umahi admits supporting Buhari in 2019 poll. So that means, as a PDP governor, he was supporting an APC candidate. Is that a new kind of politics? Do you see any dynamism there, or this is just clearly wrong?
You have the right to support whoever catches your fancy. You may say it is anti-party. Don't forget, even in the US, there are some Republicans that supported Joe Biden and in fact voted for Joe Biden. It is not a crime, constitutionally speaking, but it's not a new thing. Everybody who is politically savvy and discerning enough knows that Umahi has been President Muhammadu Buhari's political godson. Let me put it that way. So that he even defected. All the reasons that he's giving us now about PDP not compensating the Southeast enough is not the issue. The issue is that he has been a Buhari boy.
But then even that, doesn't that also raise more fundamental issues about our politics or politicking? It's very, very easy for party members to jump ship, so to speak, from one party to another within, very, very short time on whatever, reasons that they may be given at any point in time. And that has been very, very rampant in this political exercise of ours. You started the United States of America, but rarely do you see that kind of thing happen when you just jump from one party to another. It raises questions about the principles of each political party or philosophies.
When politics is not grounded in ideology, that's what you get.
So how do we strengthen that?
I don't know. Nigerian politicians are so self-centered. It is not about us. It's about them. It's about them. And that is why a lot of people are beginning to get very, very disillusioned because it is not getting better. Let me tell you my state, Imo, for instance. APC had nobody in the House of Assembly.
Actually had two. Okay, in the elections.
Yes.
Okay.
Until Uzodinma went to the Supreme Court and became the governor. All of a sudden, almost all defected to APC. And it is wrong because there are people who vote for their candidates based on which political party they are running on. So if you whimsically mortgage that mandate given to you by the people because you're a member of PDP or because you're a member of APC, you are shortchanging the people who gave that mandate. Of course, the Constitution says, particularly in the issue of members of lawmakers, that you must relinquish your mandate. But we are in a country where laws are obeyed in the breach, and the impunity goes on and on and on.
So who should enforce that one that you just talked about now? Whose responsibility is the enforcement of that law?
Institutions.
And which of them?
Institutions should be strong enough. Now, for instance, if a member of the National Assembly defers to another political party, the leadership of the National Assembly should say, this is what the law says. And therefore, you need to go back to the people and get a fresh mandate based on your new political party. So if the people so much love you that they are ready to follow you, and we have seen it happen over and over again. After all, Obaseki defected from APC to PDP and still won election. That's a vote of confidence.
Okay.
But our institutions, we have strong men rather than strong institutions, and it will continue that way.
Well, I was hoping you'd say until, but a couple of other stories on the front page of Nigerian News Direct. Something about Nigeria's foreign trade rising by 34%. Good news, you might say. That's from the MBS. But let's leave it there for Nigerian News Direct.
The Vanguard newspaper leads with something we already touched on earlier. FG stops fresh NSAS protests in Lagos and Abuja. The story is on page 5. Policemen, soldiers storm Lekki Toll Plaza. Protesters heed police warning in Lagos, stay off protest venues. Lagos police debunk viral video. Tension as NSAS protests hold in Abuja. Protesters storm street in Oshogbo, demand disbandment of brutality panel. Protesters will be dealt with decisively in Cross River, CFE warns, says memories of devastating destruction still fresh. Protest failed to hold in Ogun. You're free to protest, but hooliganism won't be tolerated, Buhari warns. All of these on the front page. Of course, we have touched on this earlier.
Protest, let me emphasize, is a democratic right. You've not committed a crime by peacefully protesting. When President Buhari, in his address at the Chatham House, I think that was 2014, said that he's a democracy convert. These are the issues many Nigerians thought he has come to terms with. That the people can say, enough is enough.
Yes, but he has said here, you are free to protest, but hooliganism won't be tolerated.
How can you say you are free to protest when you are ruling out the entire police force to stop every protest? If it is don't burn, of course nobody will support arson, hooliganism, and all that. But the people sitting down in a corner and holding up banners and saying, we want our democratic rights, it is not a crime. It's not a crime. The issue we have here is that government is talking from both sides of the mouth. You see the Chief of Army Staff, Tukur Buratai, in one corner threatening fire and brimstone. You see the IG of police, you see commissioners of police. But you can't stop an idea which time has come. There must be a fundamental change in the way we run our polity. Otherwise, this protest, no matter how hard you try to muzzle it, will continue to be there.
Interesting. Well, on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper, as usual, there are so many stories to pick, but let me pick on this one. Ghanaians await results after peaceful election. The story is on page 15. Are you also awaiting the result?
Yes, yes. And that should teach Nigerians that we are not making any progress, Ayo. You know, any well-meaning...
Many will disagree with you on that one, that we haven't made any progress. This is the Fourth Republic. It's the first time we're having democratic experience for more than 20 years.
Ayo, an election that you have to roll out 200 and something thousand policemen, the army, civil defense, to monitor a standalone election in a state. Yesterday, the election held in Ghana on Monday. Yes, there was public holiday declared in Ghana, but that was to get people to come out to vote. Nobody stopped anybody. If you watched your man there who was reporting, people were driving on the streets. There is no violence. Police did not intimidate anybody. Ghana is teaching us what democracy means. What we are practicing is not democracy.
And we are learning, Mr. Amici. We are learning.
A number of people.
There are so many issues to contend with when we look at this one. But you know, because I mean, you know how varied our politics is, how varied our cultures, how varied our interests, and so many things. Like
Are we the only country in the world that has multi-ethnic nationalities? We are not. We are not. We are not getting things right. And as long as our politics continues to be a do-or-die affair, it will impact on the quality of governance. Because when the recruitment process is flawed, highly flawed, it will give you people as leaders who were chosen not by the people, but came to power because they know somebody.
Well, the Vanguard Sports has Champions League, Messi, Ronaldo clash. Details inside. I don't know what that is about. You may know, right?
Well, interestingly about that election, the Situation Room put out a statement talking about incidents of violence, people snatching ballot boxes, people smashing, and in fact, threats of attacks and all that. So, I mean, this is a trend you will see, but I mean, it's interesting to know that we are getting better as we move ahead. But Daily Trust leads with something different. Knocks as Buhari hails armed forces, saying you're being misled. Well, that's coming from the citizens. Despite killings, CNC did better in Borno. It's coming from Governor Zulum. Security forces on alert as NSAS protest resurfaces in Osun State. You know, there's this delicate balance, you know. I mean, on one hand, the armed forces of the Federation, they sacrifice on a daily basis. And then there's the killing we just saw in Borno State. And you find people saying, well, we're not happy. And some others saying, well, they've made a lot of sacrifices. So how do you manage that delicate balance, really?
There's no doubt in the fact that our armed members of our armed forces, the military, even the police, that they have done a great deal of work in the Northeast. The soldiers are sacrificing every day. They are being killed every day. While all of us now go to sleep, they are there battling these soulless insurgents. But when I read what Governor Zulum said yesterday, I said, maybe Northeast is better off. But if you remember, that was what his predecessor, Shetima, was saying until he went to the Senate. Last week, Shetima was lamenting that people can't go to their farms unless they pay ransom to bandits. Who knows? I just pray that Zulum will not have a different story to tell us when he's no longer the governor.
Well, we are also hoping for that, because clearly there are too many issues to look at that. But then we have to just keep hoping and praying that we'll find a way to get it all right. We've come to the end of the papers this morning. We have to thank you very much. Ikechukwu Amici is the editor of the Nation newspaper. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts this morning.
Always my pleasure, yeah.
Sunrise Daily is back in a moment. Do stay with us.
Larry Bangboshe is an aviation analyst. He joins us via Zoom from Ikeja this morning to discuss what you may have been experiencing in the aviation sector. Good morning and thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily. Now, for some people, they see this as making a bad situation even worse. I mean, we're looking at a sector that has seen reduced patronage. I mean, just before COVID-19, we were saying we needed more people to fly. COVID-19 came and reduced that totally, and you know the crisis that followed. But now, with the increase in fares, people are wondering, how come? Why did this happen? So, as an insider, can you help us understand just how we got to this point?
Good morning. Good morning.
Go ahead.
Good morning.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. I think we need to situate the fact for what it is. How did we get here? First and foremost, we need to understand that dollar is a major determinant of almost everything that comes into air travel, into aviation. Where do we get planes from? Where do we train our pilots? Where do we get our rotables from? Everything that makes up the entire aviation industry is imported. So we need to put it in the right perspectives. How much do we get dollars today? So these are the issues. When you look at all the inputs that come into air travel as it is, into aviation, you find that we need to look for dollars everywhere. And I'd like to quickly put this in perspective as well. The government talked about withdrawing subsidy from oil products, which is what we experience in the country today, and we know how much we pay for fuel. So don't forget that. I'll give it to the gentlemen who are investors in aviation. They probably have been subsidizing our travel over the past years. So it's not an overnight. It's not as a result of COVID alone. The industry has been battling with so many things, and that is what has brought us to where we are today.
Quite shocking to hear you say that the operators have probably been subsidizing air travel in the country because they're in it for business. Yes, government subsidizes, but does the private sector subsidize as well?
Well, maybe don't take me out of context. When you look at the margin, if you ask me as a businessman, would I put my money in aviation or would I put it in oil and gas or in a bakery? I'll tell you, I'll put it in a bakery or in oil and gas. Because when you look at the margins in aviation, when you put $1 million in oil and gas and you put $1 million in aviation, come back and look at your returns after a year. You rather say to yourself, why am I here? But again, it's a business that some people must do. It's a business that's got value that it has as well. And a fundamental question to this is, which I've always said, how do we situate aviation? Where does the government place aviation in the midst of things in this country? When you look at Dubai, one of the things that made Dubai what it is today, it is aviation, it's Emirates. So when we want to look at what we're going to do with our country, we travel with perspectives of where we place our country globally. We need to see what we have done with our aviation. So you find that everything that you put into aviation, you're talking dollars. All the way, you're talking dollars. And don't forget, in this business, all the airlines, you have read out a list of names of airlines. Some have gone under, some are still struggling. They earn naira. Every day. To go to Abuja, you pay naira, you don't pay dollars. So you find that it is what it is. And where do they get jet fuel from? Where do they train their pilots? And all the rotables, where do they come from? The spare parts and the duties that we pay on them. So when you find that fares have gone up, look at the dollar rate over the past 10 years, how quickly it has changed. Has the FS changed alongside this pattern? No. Because if you look at the progression of dollar, the exchange rate over the past 10, 15 years, and you look at the progression or the quick changes that you find in fares, you find that the airlines have been consistently maintaining more or less the same fare range over the past few years.
Now, the question will be, is this a fault of government? Because time and again, I've heard you say government. In fact, one of the chief operating officers of a local airline says that since the government has refused to help us, we have to spread the cost across the traffic available, saying that we feel our customers, but they need to bear with us. So is this perhaps a fault of government that we're where we are right now?
I think it's a fault of all of us, because when we say government, who is government? We are the government. It's not about the president in the villa. It's not about the governor in Lagos State. It's about all of us. Until we see each other, all of us as stakeholders, then we will not be able to address the issues. I heard the National Assembly say, the chairman of the Senate committee said that to protect the industry so that aircraft don't fall out of skies. Why we're in business is to provide safety and speed. And like one of my colleagues said, rather than allow the airplanes to fall out of skies, we'd rather keep it what it is, provide safe transportation, and at the same time, spread the cost in a manner that if just 10 people are flying, more or less, that's what that statement means. We have to provide safety for them, and we have to provide it for them within the range of available resources without compromising their safety.
Well, for a while also, in the thick of the pandemic, there was a lot of talk around palliatives or buffers being given to various sectors, and there was also that conversation about the aviation sector. A number of calls were made by those in the private sector because, of course, the pandemic hit the aviation sector very, very hard because virtually no aviator was flying except for those on essential duties from the various parts of the world and all of that. Do you think such an intervention could have helped?
I think it will, because when you look at the industry globally, even IATA requested that government and different financial institutions support aviation in a manner that it can kickstart, restart itself more or less to provide that service. And when you look internationally, you find that in America, even the government is providing some intervention funding for them. Everywhere else in the world, you find a lot of intervention funding coming into place. But we're also mindful of the fact that most of these businesses are private sector businesses. So you need to define within certain limits the kind of intervention funding you'll be providing for them. You're not going to be giving them hands out. And that's why I said earlier, when I mentioned government, I'm actually referring to policy. We need to situate policy in a manner that can restart this industry properly. If you look globally, the number of bankruptcies is increasing by the day in aviation. Some airlines are, saying, hey, we can't fly international anymore. We have to, revise our business strategy and go back to being the original operator. Some are filing, Chapter 11 straight away and say we're out of business rather than be falling out of the skies. So there is no way that this industry can really come back on stream properly without government putting some support funding into it. How to define that funding is what all the stakeholders will need to sit down and do. And it's not going to be a paltry sum. As you know, aviation is heavily capital intensive. So we need significant funding, rescue funding, I will call it, to support the industry to come back alive.
There will be a need to give people watching right now and listening to you an understanding of just what this would be for, what this intervention funding would be for. Because just as my colleague has said, it's a business. And everybody knows that for every business, there are the risks and there are the ups and downs and all of that. Granted, just at the beginning of the program, we had a situation where even without a pandemic, the aviation sector has lost quite a number of airlines, which were listed, at the beginning of the program, of this segment when we began just to lay a background to it. So this intervention fund, will it be a loan, a grant? What will it be for? Is it something that the aviation sector will be paying back via other means? Just what will it be for? Since especially it is not a national carrier per se, it is a business, a private business.
Even if it's a national carrier, you're not going to be throwing freebies at it. So this intervention fund will have to be a mixed bag of grants, loan, and policy. Grants will come in form of salary rebates on dollar requirements for these businesses. Because if you find what you need to do now, if you have a scheduled maintenance, for instance, which probably costs about $1 million or $2-3 million, are you going to depend on the black market to source your dollars? No, you won't be going that route. If you do that, how much naira do you have? Can you really survive if you have to look for $2 million to maintain an aircraft during the routine maintenance, a C check, or even some other checks? So it's going to be a mixed bag of grants, loan, and some cash out as well, because the grants will come in form of policy. That's why I said government will have to consider rebates to airlines. We have pilots going on recurring trainings. Where do we get this money from? And the government supports the industry the way they're supporting some other sectors in provision of dollars. Because when the airlines have access to dollars, in the way that is affordable, then we are able to take it on. And the policy part of it is, where does government situate the aviation industry in itself? Is it an enabler? Because if aviation is situated as an enabler, there are certain provisions that government will make, which is some of these things that I'm talking about. And when you look at the tax regime in aviation, we've got VAT there, we've got so many other taxes all lined up around there. Those are the issues. Because if you say you're handing cash to them, you need to oversee how it is managed. The gentlemen running the business are business owners. They've got needs as well, needs for the business, I mean. So these are some of the issues. Until we have a proper engagement, which I think some of it is ongoing now between the National Assembly and the air operators of Nigeria, airline operators of Nigeria, and we agree a proper framework to do this, like it is done for some airlines in America and some other parts of the world, then we're able to define. It's not what we can just sit on TV for 15, 20 minutes and say, oh, we have done justice to it. It's what we must have all stakeholders sit on the table and address very frantically. It's not an issue that will be discussed and say, oh, we need $5 million. Okay, what do you need it for? If I'm sitting as a minister today, if you need $5 million, either as Minister of Finance or as Minister of Transport, Aviation, I'm not going to throw cash at you. I'm going to sit down with you and look through it line by line and situate it within the objective of government and the policy of government, which I think our minister is doing as well. And we agree on the way forward on this.
Well, would you say that's the thinking then behind the proposal, government's proposal for that 5 billion naira bailout? I think 4 billion naira for the operators and then 1 billion naira for agencies and other companies, allied companies. Would you say that's the thinking? Because for a lot of operators and stakeholders, they're saying 5 billion naira, what? I mean, for a C check, you just mentioned $2 billion, that's almost 1 billion naira. So that's maybe the C check for just maybe 4 aircraft or 5 thereabouts. So would you say that's the thinking really, saying, don't let's throw cash at them, let's find other ways to palliate the situation?
I think it's part of it, but $5 billion naira is just a drop in the ocean for the industry. It won't even solve the problem of one or two airlines.
So what would be maybe a tank in that ocean or a huge chunk? What do you think will be appropriate as bailout for the aviation sector?
I can't throw an exact figure on that, but like I said, the stakeholder engagement is ongoing. That's where we'll be able to determine how much exactly, because the need varies from airline to airlines. Some operate, we've got an airpiece that operates a large fleet. We've got an ARIC, we've got an Aero, we've got Overland. We have Max Air, we have Asma, we have new entrants like Ibom Air, and I understand a few more are coming on stream. So we need to address their needs based on what they're putting on the table. I mean, we've got other smaller airlines as well who provide very strategic services to the industry. Some support agriculture, some support oil and gas. So we need to situate all of this within the very strategic needs and then put what it is that is there. Because you could imagine our friend is talking about supporting the industry, so also is African Development Bank. Everybody sees it. I mean, it is what it is. The pandemic has come in a manner that the struggling industry has been dragged further on its knees. Because if you look at it, the pandemic actually knocked down aviation completely when you have airlines sitting down for so long. You know, it will interest you to know that when you park an aeroplane, it costs you money to park an aeroplane as much as it costs you money to fly. It turns out to be more expensive when you park it because you have to have a maintenance program on it. So you find that for the past few months that this industry had not been active at all. The operators are spending lots of money. They're keeping staff, they're paying them. The airplanes that are parked are under certain maintenance programs, because if you don't put them on these programs, you won't come back 8 months later and say you have an aeroplane. The truth is, if you come back 8 months later without a maintenance program for an aircraft, you're coming back to meet a scrap. So you find that it costs money every which way it goes. So we need to situate this very cleverly and do what we need to do.
Now, I've heard some propose 1 trillion naira bailout, some 200 billion naira. So you wonder just what that will be eventually. But some people also cast their minds back and say, as it stands right now, the Minister of Aviation actually said recently that Airline Operators Association of Nigeria owes the federal government 22 billion naira from unremitted passengers service charges, that's PSC. And that naturally raises questions about financial discipline and transparency from the operators. So do you still think there's a justification really looking back at that amount that the airline operators owe for government?
When you say I owe you money, and I also have the right to say, oh, if I owe you this, how much I owe you, there's a need for a reconciliation of accounts between the operators and the government as it were, so that we know who really owes what, and there must be an agreement to that. And I can throw this in very quickly. If truly some of them owe, which is not impossible, I think there's also that need to situate that within the realms of, okay, you owe X amount. I'm not asking for debt forgiveness, but these are part of the strategies that we have to play out. These debts, some of them, according to the minister, of course, is due to non-remittance of certain monies that should be remitted to the authorities. So we need to situate it all together. We need to say, okay, if you owe me 1 billion and you have a need for another 1 billion, I won't be able to give you 1 billion if I'm even supporting your business. I'll give you X amount. You pay X amount over a period of time, because these are some of the things we need to review. What led to all this money is being owed? We need to come back to the facts of the matter that, okay, you owe me. How come you owe me over this period of time? And there have been enough efforts by the agencies to ensure that all the debts are paid on time. For every airline that flies every day, in this business, for every time the airplane takes off, you owe money, because you have certain passenger services charges to pay to the authorities, to NCA, to NAMA, to FAN, and you have to pay this in arrears. You don't pay upfront. So we also need to look at our processes to address how come these airlines have come to owe over this period of time. And some of these debts, I can assure you, will be arising from airlines that are long gone, 5-6 years ago. And it's probably high time that government looks at these things and say, we need to take this off our books or find another way to deal with it. Because for every time that we hear that the industry owes 20 billion, 50 billion, it calls to question the integrity of the operators who are still active in the space today. So we need to also look at some of these things and be sure that we're not just calling figures, that it's also not boosting the morale of people who are still in the space.
Perhaps that speaks to one of the issues you raised earlier when we were talking about, ways to make things easier for the aviation sector. You talked about grants, loans, and policies. So when you talk about policies, just what precisely are you looking at that can help the aviation sector stay afloat? And the passengers don't necessarily have to pay through their noses.
That I would say is a very broad spectrum of things to do. One of which is you can't take aviation out of infrastructure. And when you look at infrastructure, I know the government is doing quite a number of things to support the industry from the perspective of spending quite some money on airport infrastructure redevelopment and all of that. Quite a lot of money have been brought in through Chinese loans and the rest of them to redevelop our airport infrastructure. Because when you look at the states, navigational equipments and all of that, you find that there are quite a number of airports across the country today. How many of them are really operational? We need to look at the economics of our airports. We also need to look at other policies. When you look at the entry policy into Nigeria today for foreign airlines, you find quite a number of foreign airlines flying Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, Kano, some are even Enugu. So how does that help the growth of our domestic airlines? That's one major policy issue. Because if you look at, except for the United States where we have open skies, where, again, the outside ARIC, which had operated into the United States over the past few years and struggling to do so, how many other airlines has the capacity to reciprocate this policy? So those are some of the issues that we have to look at. We need to look at our bilateral air services agreement. The policy itself needs a total overhaul. That's another one aside from the airport infrastructure. And we need to also look at the business model of our airlines. What are we doing with all the airports that are sitting in Ibadan and the rest of them? Until we make all of this work and situate it with a grand policy. Mind you, there is a master plan for aviation development in this country. We need to go back to it, dust it up properly, and make it work. Because the people that created these policies knew what they were doing. But I think we have suffered enough from policy deviation at some level. We just pick and choose in a manner that it does not build synergy that can drive growth for the industry. So a total overhaul of policy comes from the air service agreement our airports? What's our strategy for our airports? Are we commercializing them? Are we privatizing them? Are we concessioning them? Because we need to run this infrastructure as business to make them attractive also to the airport, to the airline operators. For as long as we keep them as government businesses, look at the growth that we've had in telecom industry, and look at aviation. We have talked about commercialization in aviation over far ahead of talking about the same thing for telecommunication. But look at the growth in telecommunication. Look at the level of penetration and how much growth it has experienced. Aviation will remain struggling if we don't make it a proper business. We have not really made it a business. The airports are there. I know there are very touchy issues about, if you concession, people will not be happy, people will be out of jobs. But as it is going, we need to run a business. We need to even run the country as a business.
Well, an effort at that, in the not too distant past would probably suggest, maybe there are things that we need to do in that regard. But you also mentioned airline operators earlier, and it brought to my mind what the Director General of the NCAA had suggested at one, as a result of all of this, that he foresees a possible merger of airline operators in Nigeria so that they can stay afloat. Do you see that something that's even considerable?
That will work with some people and it will not work with some others. What is the philosophy of each business? Are their philosophies agreeable in a manner that airline A can merge with airline B? What is your modus operandi? An airline that is primarily structured to service secondary airports may not necessarily need to merge with another airline, but to also build synergies, which is what we talk about, interline, code share, and the rest of them. We can try it domestically. I'll take you back a short history. Some years back, we had an airline in this country called ADC, EAS, and Bellevue at the time. And they had this very, 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 very creative idea of, we've got a wave of about 5 departures between 7 and for instance, 11 o'clock in the morning. If, for instance, you miss your 7 a.m. departure, you can just, that's a Bellevue departure, you can jump on 8:30 departure by EAS or something. That worked to some extent. But again, like I said, it comes to the philosophy of the businesses and the owners of those businesses. As you know, we were particularly very egoistic in this country, some of us, not all of us. And what we say, this is my airline, so I'll do it the way I want. So those are some of the issues. And at some point, when this relationship blossoms, it tends to fall apart. So we were getting to that stage where we all have to sit together and clearly address the issues and say, this is what we want. So measures, yes, for those with agreeable philosophy, but cooperation, I would rather push for cooperation than measures, because how do you bring an airline A to talk to airline B? Perhaps acquisition, maybe that will work, but it's an open discussion. It's subject to agreement between airline A and airline B. A merger can be considered, which will bring economy of scale to the table. We have seen big mergers in America and in some other parts of the world. Maybe we could experience the same in this country. So the DG in his wisdom has spoken well. As much as I agree with him, I also see a roadblock there regarding the ownership of some of those airlines.
We're winding down in less than a minute. And just to clear this, because we began talking about the airfares, would airlines have increased fares without consulting NCAA? Because I understand that the provision says a carrier that may so wish to change rates should intimate the Directorate of Air Transport Regulation of the NCAA. So would they have done that without the no of the NCAA?
I think we may be losing sight of some internal workings of airlines when we say they have increased fares. Over the past years, it's always been the standard practice. You can actually fly to Abuja for 30,000, in spite of everything we're saying today that fares have gone up. It's about when you buy. Airlines have got a pricing module. The pricing modulation is flexible in a manner that I can sell future. I can sell Abuja for February 2021 for 25,000 naira. And some guy will buy that 21st February 2021 for 25,000 naira. Some other guy will buy the same thing for 100,000 naira. Don't forget that everybody is talking about price increase now. Some of them are actually, I'm not ruling out the fact that there's been some adjustments in fares. Some of them are late, last-minute buyers. When you buy all over the world, it's standard practice for the business, for the industry. You pay more. But when you buy weeks, months ahead, you pay less. So when you say airlines have actually increased their fares, have they really increased their fares? I don't think so.
Right.
It's also about people who are doing last-minute buying. Yeah, there's been some modulation to pricing, which, slight adjustments and all of that. But
Well,
that is
spoken very well, Mr. Larry Bangbushe. I see what you did there, but would like to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on the program. Mr. Larry Bangbushe is an aviation analyst. He joins us via Zoom from Ikeja. Well, we'll go on a break now, and when we return, we'll turn our attention to politics. Something is brewing in Imo State, and that will be our next discussion. Please stay with us.
Well, what you saw is election day and all of the optimism expressed by all of the candidates that you see there. But the backstory is that election had two candidates, of the APC vying for that one slot. That is why the APC was declared winner, but no candidate was returned by INEC. So why? Because yesterday, while we were talking about elections, yesterday you also listened to one of our our discussants talking about it and saying, this is one of those issues that we need to deal with. So let's get some perspective on this and why we have two candidates of the same party in the same state, in the same senatorial zone, contesting the same election. Two gentlemen join us for now. We hope to have a third. Victor Giwa is of the APC in Imo State, and he is of one of the factions, and he's right there beside him is the PDP chieftain in Imo State, speaking for his own candidate, Meka Okulonu, Uche Onyinye-Jocha, as well as Einaya Onwegbo, who has just joined us via the virtual platform. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. Let's begin with you, Mr. Giwa. So give us a backstory. Just what are we dealing with here?
All right, thank you very much. Good morning. First of all, I want to correct that introduction. I am not of the APC. I'm in the team, the legal team of the Senator Ifeanyi Aragome's legal team representing the Imo North, senatorial district. So I'm just a lawyer and I'm in his legal team. So I'm not a card-carrying member of the APC. So I just need to get that part straightened up. Yeah, well, thank you very much. Well, like you said, there have been a lot of issues, regarding the Imo North, senatorial district by-election that was conducted on the 5th of December. That was just last Saturday. And of course, the result has been announced, and the APC has been declared to be the winner of that election. However, there's still a conflict in terms of representation, who is the candidate of the APC in that election. And the reason is this. Prior to that election, there were primaries conducted by the APC, sometimes on the 3rd of September 2020. The primaries was conducted in Okigwe. It had about 11 aspirants who contested, including, of course, our client, our candidate, that is Senator Ifeanyi Aragome. And of course, with one of the controversial candidates, which is Frank Mbizem, amongst others. The background to it was that Mr. Frank Mbizem, who is contending against our candidate, and some other persons, about 6 of them, were actually disqualified from participating in the APC by-election primaries that was held on the 3rd of September 2020. And his disqualification was based on the screening committee of the APC. And the basis was that he presented some certificates that was declared to be
Mr.
forged.
Giwa, who disqualified this candidate that you're talking about? Who disqualified him?
The screening committee of the APC as established under the APC guideline.
Okay, let me very quickly ask the same question of Mr. Eina Onwegbo, who joins us, virtually. So you just heard him. Can you confirm that that is true, that your candidate, Frankie Bezim, was actually disqualified?
Well, good morning. Thank you. It looks like Channels has become the destination point for angry politicians from Imo State. The point is that Frankie Bezim, up to the time of contesting that primaries, the declaration of that result was never disqualified. The story of being disqualified came out of a press conference in Abuja 2 days after he had been declared the winner of the primaries. I challenge anybody to produce any statement or any video clip of an announcement by the screening committee, because the work of the screening committee is subject under the Constitution to a decision of the party NEC. Let them bring a decision of the NEC that disqualified Frankie Bezim, who we all know was a student of Imo State University, who had served as a commissioner in Imo State, who was a chief of staff to the late distinguished Senator Benjo Wajimogu. He was never disqualified. It was because there was a faction that went and held their own primaries outside that, other than the party. That group went and brought a report that Frankie Bezim was disqualified after the declaration of results, and went to court against their other opponents without joining Frankie Bezim in the litigation. So this is a contrived plot. Let them produce the decision of NEC of our party, ratify any so-called screening committee decision. Because on the eve of the primaries, we all were at the ESCO chambers, all the aspirants, the party structure, and the government appointees. We were there, and nobody talked about disqualification. Everybody agreed on the eve of the primaries to participate in that primaries. It was after the result had been declared in his favor that this story of disqualification came up.
Okay, we'll
just at the eve.
Just one moment.
Yes.
We'll discuss other issues on this one, but let me go to Mr. Onyejocha. But just so you know, Mr. Onwegbo, our interest is not in the politicians. It's in the interest of the people of Imo State who are at this moment being disenfranchised, because as we speak, they have elected, according to the Constitution, a member of a political party through the political party. But right now, we do not have any representation. Consequently, that is why you are also here to help us clear the air. So back to you, Mr. Onyejocha. So this is happening, and you are in the opposition in Imo State, in this particular senatorial constituency. Just what do you make of all of this going on?
Thank you very much. The operating law in Nigeria for the declaration of a winner in an election is guided by Section 69 of the Electoral Act and Sections 133, 134, and 179 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. And those provisions simply says that it is the candidate who wins the highest number of votes that should be declared the winner in an election. In this election of Imo North Senatorial Zone, INEC has openly admitted that APC does not have a candidate, because if APC had a candidate, they would have declared that candidate the winner of the election. INEC is running in violation of the law by declaring APC the winner. The winner of that election is Chief Emma Okewulono of the PDP, and he should be declared the winner of the election. It is not our fault, it is not our problem that APC is not able to resolve the issue of their candidature. According to my friend Giwa, who spoke first, he said their primary election took place on the 3rd of September. One Frankie Bezim emerged the winner. His name was filed, and we went into the field contesting the election, campaigning. And I believe that if he were not the candidate, it is for APC to sort out. And this election ought to have been held. The period to file, remove, or substitute a candidate has since expired. But came November 6th, 2020, one Senator, Ifeanyi Ararume, was announced the winner of a court judgment by a federal high court, replacing the same Frankie Bezim. The next thing we saw, the two of them went into the field, and they have been campaigning equally as joint candidates. Ararume's posters are all over the place in Okiwe, and the Frankie Bezim's posters are all over the place. So both of them went into the field campaigning. We complained to INEC that we do not know who we are contesting against, and they should actually get this thing resolved, because it was improper to have two candidates campaigning as people holding the same position in the same political party. While all this was going on, by December 4th, a day before the election, two court judgments were thrown into the field, one purporting to be disqualifying Ifeanyi Ararume, and another one kicking out Frankie Bezim. So we went into this election with nobody as candidate of the APC. And at the end of the election, INEC, seeing that we won the election, being the only candidate and the runners-up to the election, because we had 31,000 votes plus, according to INEC, while APC proposed to have 36,000 votes plus. They should have declared us the winners of the election and allow APC to sort out themselves, because we're not going to wait for them to sort out themselves before a candidate will be declared as the winner of that election. Because tomorrow they might throw up Omegra, and next tomorrow they might throw up Owajimogu or any of the other aspirants who were in the field.
Well, Mr. Onyegocha, it would seem you're trying to do the job of INEC, which is electoral umpire, by declaring the winner of this election. But clearly, INEC has done that. And that brings up the classic question. And Mr. Giwa, I'd like you to weigh in on this. Do the people vote for the party or the candidate? Because clearly, it would seem as though the APC is still not decided on who their candidate is, but people voted the party in the election. So who did the people really vote for, the candidate or the party?
Well, it is a question of the chicken before the egg or the egg before the chicken. But if you look at it constitutionally, the provision is that for a person to contest for an election, he must be sponsored by the political party. So the first place, it is the political party. It is the party that is the vehicle. It's like driving a vehicle or a commuter, going out there to the street, and you see a vehicle that is conveying you to a particular location, and you intend to identify who the driver is. So it is the vehicle that you want to enter, the vehicle that is taking you to a particular destination. So, and in the strength of the case of Amechi versus INEC, the Supreme Court have also said that it is the political party, if you could remember that landmark judgment, where the Supreme Court said, well, Amechi never contested. It was the party, the PDP then, that contested the election. And of course, the Supreme Court made an order, a consequential order that the candidate of the party that won that election should be sworn in. So in the first place, it is the party that is. That is why in the ballot, you don't see the pictures of candidates. What you see is the logo of the political party. So based on the Constitution and the Electoral Act and the decided authorities of the Supreme Court, it is the political party that is the vehicle. People subscribe to the political party. When you want to vote, people look at the manifesto of the political party.
Well, so then in the light of what you're saying, Mr. Giwa, in the light of what you have said, which of these candidates, in your opinion, did the political party select? Because from the reports and statements put out by the National Working Committee, it is the candidature was given to Frankie Bezim and not to Mr. Ifeanyi Ararume.
Yes, I can tell you for free. I think we need to follow it carefully and systematically so that you can get the gist. Now, like I was saying, and which my other colleague there, he misconstrued and misconceived, with due respect to him, some of the facts. Now, the APC is bounded by its guidelines and its constitution. And paragraph 3 of the APC guideline to primaries says that only aspirants who have been cleared can contest a primary election. The candidacy of Ibezim and 5 others were disqualified by the screening committee of the APC. They appealed against the screening committee. And the screening committee appeal unit, the appeal screening committee, upheld that disqualification and cleared 7 others, including my candidate, Senator Ifeanyi Agagume, to participate in the primary election that was slated for 3rd of September.
If this is correct, if this what you have said,
Committee
Mr.
of the
Giwa, just a
APC,
moment. If what you have said is the correct position, how come the APC National Working Committee is not aware of what you are talking about right now? And they put out a statement to validate the position of a specific person who is not your client.
Yeah, the reason why they did that to me is, and to us, is a bit baffling. That is some of the issues we are having with internal politicking, where some persons who have, vested interest in a state, people like I call emperors, governors, we want to muzzle up the political party and try to suppress the voice of rule of law and, internal democracy.
Don't forget
like
that,
said,
just a moment, Mr. Giwa. Don't forget that the candidature of Mr. Ibezim was validated by the party's Extraordinary National Planning Committee, chaired by Governor Mai Mala Buni, who is, of course, his position in the APC at this time. And so, consequently, this is what has happened. So it isn't your client that was validated by the National Working Committee, and it wasn't even the governor that made this statement. So where are you going with the name of the governor being mentioned here?
The reason...
Mr. Moderator, sorry, we are not here for Mr. Giwa because you've asked him a previous question 3 times. So if you want to do an interview for him, you invite him alone.
No,
he has been allowed to answer 3 times, so I must come in. I won't let him proceed.
Okay, just go ahead. If you have anything to say.
Let me clarify that point.
Okay.
Mr. Giwa is saying that he has seen the vehicle, that it is the APC that is the vehicle. So why is he quarreling since APC has been declared winner? He should go home and celebrate. The only reason why he cannot celebrate is that the law says only a candidate of a party can be declared a winner. APC doesn't have a candidate. We must go back to the fact that in 2019, when this election was conducted, PDP won the election. While the result was being collated, the returning officer, like this time around, declared APC the winner. So we will not allow this injustice to go a second time around.
Okay.
What needed to have been done is that whoever is filed as candidate of the APC should have been on the ballot. That is the person who should have been in the field contesting against.
Not what, Mr. Joshua, just one moment. Gentlemen, just one moment.
The person at
if you go to INEC website...
Just one moment. Gentlemen, just one moment. Just one moment, gentlemen. Just one moment. Let's take this to Mr. Onwegbo in Owerri at this moment. So this is where we have right now, and it would seem like a court order has stopped your candidate from going ahead, from being announced as the candidate, as the winner of this election. So what is the way forward now for your candidate, given these court orders that are conflicting?
Thank you very much. Mr. Giwa's client is claiming candidacy by virtue of a judgment of a federal high court. That case, Frank Ibezim was not sued. He went to Court of Appeal and obtained a judgment that set aside the judgment of the federal high court. Now the Court of Appeal is superior to that federal high court. Why are they still banding the name of his client as candidate? Now, as to Mr. Onyagocha, he has not told you that the candidacy of for any election for a party is subject to judicial interpretation. That is why we have pre-election cases. Until a pre-election case ends, he cannot really claim what he's claiming. That is why in the past, In the case of Senator Sidis and our present governor, it was the Supreme Court that affirmed the owner of the ticket in line with the judgment in the Rotimi case. Now, we are not talking about a contest between PDP and APC in primaries. It's a contest internal to the party APC. And the decision of the party is that proceeds from the neck of the party or the National Working Committee of the party that actually set up a screening committee. Why are they not referring to the decision of the NEC or the National Working Committee of the party on who is our candidate? Why did they have to go to court if they didn't know that Frankie Bezin was the candidate? They went to court because they know Frankie Bezin was the candidate at the issue. They were in a pre-election, pre-primaries meeting where Frankie Bezin was announced as one of the candidates. The results published showed that Frankie Bezin pulled the highest number of votes and was number one on a list of 12 candidates who aspired for that position. Why are they playing politics with everything in Imo? The story of trying to bring in the governor is embarrassing because the governor is not from Okigwe zone. They seem to forget that the late Senator Benju Wajibobu had his chief of staff as Frankie Bezin, and that structure delivered Frankie Bezin. We must bear in mind that mentioning the governor's name is like looking for salt to make a soup tasty. They must look for salt because the story will be tasty all over the world. Imo people know who they voted for, APC. And in the last election, APC also won. The candidate of APC is the winner of the election. If
you
PDP
also know,
grounds,
Mr.
they should go
Onogo,
and file a petition.
just one moment, Mr. Onogo. You also know that at this point, INEC has declared APC as winner of the election, but could not mention the name of any particular candidate because of these court judgments. So what do we do?
Well, we should say they have not, because you remember, on the eve of the election, 2 judgments came. The election was on Saturday. By Friday, 2 judgments came. And INEC, as a bureaucracy, in due process, must verify the judgments and give an interpretation. They have not declared a winner in terms of candidacy. They have declared a winner in terms of political party. And the victory and the election contested belong to the political party, the vehicle. Let us not make mountain out of molehill. INEC knows that the Court of Appeal judgments overrides any federal high court judgment, and ordinarily should have announced the man declared by the Court of Appeal as the candidate of the party, which is Frankie Bezin. And we believe it is not too late yet to announce it. If anybody has an anger about it, the person should go to an election petition tribunal, not telling us what happened 4 years ago, how PDP won. Where did PDP win? The case went to the tribunal, went to the Court of the Appeal Tribunal, and Benju Wajibobu, may God rest his soul, won the cases. So let us keep ourselves guided by the law. Everybody knows that the judgment of a court supersedes the decision of a party in candidacy. And until the final court pronounces.
All right, Mr. Onogo, just one moment. Let's just a moment, Mr. Onogo. Let's take a break for a few messages, and when we return, we'll be able to cap this all up. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. So, Mr. Giwa, you want to speak to the comment made by Mr. Onogo earlier about the superiority of the appeal court over that of the High Court, where your client got a judgment from.
Yeah, thank you very much. You can see why I firstly mentioned the governor of the state. You saw his proclamation to say that the candidate of the APC was Frankie Bezin. But let me go to the issue raised by Uwogu in terms of the Court of Appeal. Now, you need to understand that on the 6th of November, the Federal High Court in Owerri declared Senator Ifeanyi Aragume as the valid candidate for the APC by a consequential order. Just like the governor has enjoyed the product of a court ruling, the governor today in Imo State is there because of the decision of the Supreme Court, which was obeyed by all parties, even when they have issues with that decision. And so I expected that when that order was given, so he made reference to the Court of Appeal. Now, in the case of the Federal High Court decision in Owerri that was delivered on the 6th, the Federal High Court said Senator Ifeanyi Aragume is the only candidate of the party. And his name was entered, his name was retained by INEC. Now, on the 4th Yes, on the 4th of December, the Court of Appeal in Owerri upturned that decision and said that the word of the Court of Appeal was that that decision was set aside. But on the same date, a federal high court in Abuja declared the same Frank Mbezem as being patently disqualified to contest that election on the basis of false declaration, perjury, false information given as to his documents, act done to give himself advantage over his qualification. And so the only thing left is the name of Senator Ifeanyi Aragume as the candidate of APC. And the Senator Ifeanyi Aragume has also filed a motion for stay of that order in Court of Appeal. So assuming without conceding that the Court of Appeal has made a pronouncement to set aside the decision of the Federal High Court, which my brother there in Imo State alleged it seems to be basing their position on. That decision of the Court of Appeal was to set aside the judgment of the Federal High Court in Owerri. Now there is a judgment on the same date that have said, okay, why the Court of Appeal have said, oh, that judgment is set aside. The Frank Mbezem cannot be the candidate of the party. So as it stands right now, it is not a matter of whether the Court of Appeal is of a higher court than the Federal High Court. It is what is the subtractum, what is on ground. So Senator Ifeanyi Aragume is now the candidate. Is still the subsisting candidate.
You know, it's quite intriguing. It's quite intriguing
reasons.
to see the
One,
interpretations of the court rulings. I mean, both sides. I mean, you understand that that's what lawyers do. But before I get Mr. Onoegbu's response, I'd like to take up Mr. Oyegocha on an issue he spoke to. That's the result of the election. And you say that the PDP won when clearly INEC declared that the APC polled 36,811 votes and the PDP got 31,903 votes. I mean, you don't need a mathematician to tell you that the APC clearly won that election according to INEC. And some are saying, isn't this just being opportunistic because clearly the APC won this election?
Not allow a party to win election without a candidate. If votes are cast for a party whose candidate is not known, that candidate would not be allowed to be declared winner because only their candidate can be declared winner. So for the purpose of this election, APC obviously did not have a candidate. And INEC acknowledged that by not pronouncing their candidate the winner. So the appropriate thing in law is to declare the PDP candidate the winner, while APC takes the whole time in the world to sort out themselves. Now, what we are facing as at this moment is a case of APC dragging the judiciary into the mud. Look at the 3 different court judgments they obtained. The one of November 6th, and at which period the time for substitution of a candidate has elapsed. Now, once the time for substitution of a candidate has elapsed in law, you can take your time to do your case up to the Supreme Court. INEC had no business introducing Ifeanyi Aragume into the race because by introducing Ifeanyi Aragume, by virtue of that judgment of November 6th, allowed an opportunity for the 2 of them to be contesting and campaigning in the election against our candidate. And by getting 2 judgments on the same day, November 4th, the day before the election, the APC once again dragged the judiciary into the mud by creating further confusion with the judgment from the Court of Appeal and another judgment from the Federal High Court. One disqualifying Ifeanyi Aragume and the other one disqualifying Frank Mbezem. So we went into the field without a candidate. And I am saying the appropriate thing is that they should have gone to the Supreme Court allow us to run election with only one candidate. In the absence of a defined candidate, which is clear from what INEC did, the INEC should declare Chief Emma Okewulono, the PDP candidate, as the winner of the election, being the second runner-up. There is nothing opportunistic about it. APC has never been able to put the house in order, and there are too many of their other aspirants still in court saying that they are still the candidates of this election. My good friend, Matthew Omegra, is in court claiming that he is the candidate for the purpose of the Okigwe senatorial election, which took place. So are we going to have to wait forever for them to sort out themselves?
You know, that's the same
candidate.
That's the same question,
can be
because
to enjoy the benefit of the election we won.
Understood, but you know, the decision will be at INEX level or maybe at the court, not at the parties level, which is what I wanted to clear out. But Mr. Honorable, now reacting to some of the issues Mr. Giwa raised, especially before the primaries. Right, understood. Pardon me. Let me take on Mr. Honorable so we can have a rounded conversation because of our time. Now, before the primaries, there was this screening committee, the Imo North Senatorial Screening Committee, that disqualified your candidate. And I mean, in law, you say you can't build nothing, or rather something on nothing. So referring to that, people are saying, especially for the other candidate, they're saying, well, he wasn't even meant to participate in the primaries in the first place.
That is not the position. I said it before, that on the eve of the primaries, every aspirant attended a meeting with the organizing committee from Abuja, from the national headquarters of the party. Let them produce a video clip of the organizing committee declaring any aspirant as disqualified. They went into the field and contested. Frankie Bezin won. It was 48 hours after the victory that the story, via a video clip from one hotel in Abuja, that emerged saying Frankie Bezin was disqualified. And somebody went to court at the Federal High Court of Owerri and sued the party and other aspirants without suing the Frankie Bezin, who had been declared winner. It is that case that brought the judgment of the Federal High Court that Mr. Giwa's client is relied on. And mind you, by November 4th, Frankie Bezin had been in the field campaigning as the only candidate of the party. When that judgment came, Frankie Bezin went to the Court of Appeal. In obedience to the hierarchy of courts, the Court of Appeal set aside the judgment of that Federal High Court. So INEC was bound ab initio, like they obeyed in putting around Mesnen, to put Frankie Bezin, announce him as a candidate following the Court of Appeal judgment. But because some mischievous persons went forum shopping in Abuja, there's a Federal High Court in Imo State, and the law is that you do a case where the defendants are based. The cause of action arose in Imo State. Who went to Abuja to do what? Is the Federal High Court in Abuja not aware of the judgment of the Federal High Court in Owerri that had been set aside by the Court of Appeal? That is what we call in law forum shopping. So
just as we wind down,
to get that order.
As we wind down, just one issue I'd like you to respond to, because people cast their mind back to what happened in Zamfara State, and we know how your party lost out in that, and they're saying, well, maybe that will happen in this case. So the question now is, the APC has a NEC meeting today, and you would expect these issues to be tabled. Would you say you trust the NEC to resolve this? Whatever comes out, you're going to take that?
The matter is a matter, internal affair of the party, resolvable by the NEC or by court judgment. And the highest court judgment pending is the one in favor of Frankie Bezin. And I believe in due time, INEC will do the needful like they did in the past by declaring Frankie Bezin as the winner.
Okay, Mr. Giwa.
Who has a grasp should go to an election petition tribunal.
Right, Mr. Giwa is your candidate.
That Onyakucha is saying is wishful thinking.
Right. Pardon me, Mr. Giwa. So looking at the APC NEC meeting today, is your candidate comfortable with whatever resolution comes out of that meeting regarding who should represent Imo North Senatorial District?
My candidate will be comfortable because, firstly, the issue is prejudice. The issue is before the court. So I don't think the National Working Committee will sit as an appeal against a judicial process. That first of all, the judgment of the Court of Appeal have been stayed. My client have filed his motion for stay and his notice of appeal. So I believe that the National Working Committee, that is a legal, I believe they have, lawyers who will advise them. I believe they believe in rule of law. I believe they are going to retain. They are going to say, okay,
The
for the purpose of
just
the court
one moment,
judgment,
Mr.
in order
Giwa.
not to disrupt the
Well,
legal,
Mr.
the
Giwa,
status quo.
Yeah, Mr. Giwa, just a moment. Well, you know that the National Working Committee already put out a statement, so I don't know how they're going to, opt on their own previous decision. But we have to thank you very much for your time this morning, gentlemen. Victor Giwa is counsel to Mr. Ararume, who contested that election, along with Mr. Frankie Bezim, who's represented here by Ina Onwegbu, who joined us virtually, as well as a PDP chieftain in Imo State, Uche Onyejocha. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time and your opinions this morning. Sunrise Daily takes one last look at just one segment, and then we're done. Stay with us.
More than 17 million Ghanaians have headed to the polls today, with all eyes focused on the presidential election, as former President John Mahama challenges President Nana Akufo-Addo. Both sides have campaigned on issues of youth unemployment, security, and the effects of coronavirus pandemic on the country's economy. Right before the elections, both sides had signed a peace pact that said that they would be committed to a peaceful election with no violence, and that they would curb supporters from reacting unreasonably, no matter which way the polls go. President Nana Akufo-Addo and John Mahama, both the main challengers, amidst 12 others, cast their ballots, and President Akufo-Addo says he's confident of victory.
And my expectation is that the work that the government has done in these 4 years will find favor with the Ghanaian people.
All eyes are on the West African economic powerhouse to see if it can maintain its standing as a bastion of democracy in the unstable region where election disputes this year have fanned fears of a slide back into authoritarianism. Apart from the presidential election, a new parliament is also expected to be elected.
I'm so proud to be a Ghanaian who is elected my president, the one I want to be the leader for the next 4 years.
Last year, Ghana emerged from a 3-year lending program with the International Monetary Fund, only for the new coronavirus to knock demand for its key exports of oil and cocoa. If re-elected for a second term, the president is promising to push ahead with a $17 billion recovery program to boost jobs, while Mahama's Keystone Pledge is a $10 billion infrastructure plan.
As you have seen, Chukwuemeka Eze joins us this morning, his Executive Director, West African Network for Peace Building, to discuss that election in Ghana and, of course, the implication on the region in Africa. Thank you for joining us on Sunrise Daily. Now, there's been a report put out, really, about the conduct of the election in Ghana, talking about voter participation, some isolated cases of verbal and physical attacks. But in general, really, looking at this election and the projection, how we got here, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think generally the election has been a huge success. You will see the nature of democracy that the Ghanaian people are practicing, how they continue to deepen their democratic ethos and begin to also continue to set the example of what democracy should be on our continent. I think that apart from a few hitches here and there, which are mostly very isolated, generally the election has been very, very successful, and it's lessons for all of us in Africa.
When you say lessons for all of us in Africa, how do you mean? What kind of lessons should we learn from that?
I think the first lesson for me is the professionalism that is being displayed by the election management body, beginning with the Electoral Commission, the way that every action that it has taken throughout the process of this election has been predictable. I think the number one gauge for us for an election that is going to be peaceful and transparent is the ability of the electorate and the party candidates to predict the next action of INEC. Let me give you an example. The Ghanaian election date is constitutional. It is not within a time frame. It is a date set aside for that process. So already you know when the next election is coming up, even after this one is over. The second thing is that you already have the timetable of the next election. Once this election is over, you have the timetable leading to the 7th of December. That's also very key. The next thing is that there is no ambiguity about where the ballot papers are printed, who prints it, and the kind of transparency that allows party agents to be part and parcel of the printing of that ballot paper and the serial number that goes to each of the constituencies. So all this is done. And then they have a inter-party mechanism, the IPAC, that they use as a dialogue process to negotiate between the two main political parties and other actors in the political arena about what goes into the election processes. That is also lessons for us to learn. That's on one part. The second one is the party ideology. Ghanaian people respect their party to the extent that it is difficult for you to get more than 1% of each of the party voting across board. It doesn't happen. So even the candidates of the two main political parties, the National Democratic Congress and the New Patriotic Party, all they chase are the floating voters. The floating voters decide the election in Ghana, and that's why it's always neck to neck. And that also puts the leaders on their toes, knowing fully well that a misstep means that your party is gone for the next 4 years. So there are many other lessons that we can learn. The freedom of the media in Ghana is also very high. The ability of these people to interrogate these leaders. Of course, there are a few things that the Ghanaian democracy still need to learn, even from the other countries in Africa. For example, I was unpleasantly surprised that they did not agree to debate to enable the citizens to also compare notes. But of course, what answer did they give? They said that because both leading candidates have been present at one point or the other, that it has given the citizens the opportunity to assess them and vote on those bases. But outside that, I think that the trajectory Ghanaian democracy is going is something that we all need to appreciate and learn from. And I think we can all do that.
And that's quite curious, really, hearing both candidates saying, well, they've been presidents at some point, so what's the point in addressing the people? And the thought is, I mean, you see what happens in other countries, whether you've been president or not, you still have that, that role, as it were, that responsibility to speak to your people and tell them what plans you have. So really, what does that say about the political system?
Well, like I said earlier on, that's a minus for me because that citizens' right to interrogate the presidential candidates, we lost it. Of course, they engaged in different types of town hall meeting and all of that. But to be honest, I don't think we can get a perfect system. But in my opinion, it is to look at such gaps and see even how the political elites can begin to do something in that direction. For example, one of the recommendations that ONEP is going to come up with is whether it is possible to legislate on the debate, give a criteria and a framework that will ensure that no political party will escape the debate. Otherwise, you can even be disqualified. But because I think that the political actors that constitute less than 1% of the population should understand that the mandate that they enjoy is from the citizens, and they should not take the citizens for granted when the time is right to do so.
The thing that intrigued me in all of this conversation is the involvement of the youth. According to reports, we understand that in the 30 million thereabout population of the country, about 17 million people went to the polls for that election. What's the percentage, if you can, give us an estimate of youths who are involved, and what, in your opinion, was the voter turnout, especially from the youth angle? What's the level of participation or involvement or interest of the young population in Ghana in the elections?
This interview is what is holding me from being in the Situation Room at the moment. So we are going to come out with our final report sometime during the day, and I'll share it with channels. But already, I've gotten an invitation from the African Union to attend the joint briefing between African Union and ECOWAS at 11 a.m. Ghanaian time. So I should be able to have more figures that looks more accurate when I'm in the Situation Room. However, one thing to understand and underscore is that if you miss the youth population in Ghana, you are going to lose an election. And that is why they pay serious attention to the youth question. So number one, each of those political parties have indeed the youth wing that is very functional and vocal. And to the extent that this youth also negotiate positions in the government once the government is formed. So it is not just about using them to succeed during the election. After the election, they negotiate positions at the level of ministers. They negotiate a number of positions at that level. The second thing to also underscore is the number of youths that are aspiring to be in the parliament, and indeed the number in parliament. If you look at the age bracket of Ghanaian parliament, you'll be shocked at how many youths that we have, both contesting the election and those who are also in the parliament. And therefore, for me, it's also another lesson to learn that the women, the youth, the so-called vulnerable groups are very active in the Ghanaian politics.
Well, one other thing that, piques my interest is that's one of the issues that built up to the election, which is the review of the voter register, which some said, raised some furore, so to speak, some issues among the people in the country. The Electoral Commission, reviewed the voter register. How significant was that in the entire process?
Extremely significant. It raised a number of issues. Number one is to appreciate the fact that the current chair of the Electoral Commission is new. And the circumstance under which she came into power was also something that the opposition kicked against, because the opposition had nominated the previous one, who only conducted one election and was kicked out of office and replaced by the current one, Jean Mensah. Now, Jean Mensah said, the first thing I want to do is to clean the voters register. The opposition raised issues about it. Some segments of civil society raised issues about it. Why? Because they felt the time was too short. They felt it was at the height of the coronavirus pandemic and that it was not safe. But she insisted, stood her ground, despite all pressure, stood her ground and conducted it. Now, they are saying that they have a very clean register. However, just like every new register, there are issues that some people can come with their card, they won't see their names in the register, or their names are in the register, and if they do the biometric verification, it will not match. So those issues are there. But in my opinion, from the assessment we have made, it is insignificant, those issues that came. And of course, you also remember that even the conditionalities that were put in place for the procurement of the new voters card, which includes that you must submit either an international passport or a national ID card, which some people did not have. So the opposition political party felt it was also a ploy to disenfranchise some of their members. And secondly, it also led to the issue you saw in West.
Mr. Isaac, we're totally out of time, but we'll stay with you because we understand that the results might be coming anytime from today. So we'll definitely stay in touch just to get updates. But we'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze, who's the Executive Director, West Africa Network for Peace Building, WANEP.
Well, that's just before we go, a couple of messages. Professor Enakena, sent this about the Imo by-elections. Imo State has become the theater of the absurd. A political impasse brought about by the brokenness of the trust imposed on the political class. APC appears not to learn anything from past internal wrangling.
Well, Abdulkadir Nasidi is concerned about airfares, saying local airfares increase. Whatever we're doing in aviation is clearly not working well because the airfares are still rising, but not the quality of services.
And those concerns are not just going to go away. We have to work them to ensure they don't come back. That's Sunrise Daily today. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.
And I'm Kayode Kikelu. Thank you for joining us.